Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another edition of Jerry's Take on China from my hotel room in Guangzhou. This one, in my opinion, is one of the most important that I've done. It appears to me that the US would really like to decouple from China in many respects. And while creating an environment to improve their own manufacturing is great, I think, creating one to destroy others is not. It's evil, it's discriminatory, and it's only carried out for one purpose: to maintain primacy. Despite all the rhetoric, if anyone cares to look, they'll see that year on year, month on month, trade between China and the USA generally increases. If you don't believe me, check the US Trade Department's own figures. Decoupling is not an eventuality on anyone's mind, or it shouldn't be right now. But the recent CHIPS bill, that's creating helpful incentives to produce semiconductors, coupled with another bill, the Innovation and Competition Act just a year ago, make it patently clear that the USA is leaning towards a world order in which it remains or becomes the dominant producer and controller of any technology, while it stymies, hinders, threatens, bullies, blocks, bans, and sanctions China back into the 20th century. Economists may say decoupling can't happen. Psychologists would say it could, but it would end badly. China's given no hint that it will go in this direction. It knows it would be a disaster. Economically, it would be disastrous for the world. It could wipe billions off the value of everything we've ever invested in. It would make money worth a lot less, and there'd be trillions in lost income for China over the years. China would need to completely rethink its debt. It would need infrastructure and investment plans changed. Poverty alleviation and rural revitalization would be set back decades, and the 5-year plans that they're so famous for would be useless. They'd need to be rewritten for the next 30 years or so. Globally, the Belt and Road Initiative could be in danger of a collapse. From a psychology standpoint, it's quite apparent that no one in the US State Department or the White House administration really understands the psyche of China. China is a long-term focused country, and so are its people. They don't think much about the benefits right now. They think very much about what's the benefit in 25 or even 50 years' time. Psychologists know this dimension of culture as long-term orientation. Look it up. Academic observers, such as the Harvard Ash Report and the University of California, unerringly find one thing that surprises the average China watcher or China expert, and that is that Chinese people are generally very satisfied with their lives. They're optimistic of the future. Less recently, surveys in 2013 by Pew found widespread optimism coupled with some concerns, which, judging by the more recent surveys, seem to have been overcome. Now, that would come as something of a shock to most US citizens as they view their news reports, which keep telling them the same story. China's wonderful, the people are wonderful, the food is great, the government is terrible. Compare this with US surveys of government satisfaction, you'll immediately see a different story. There are so many to choose from, but a good satisfaction rate in the US government usually hovers around the mid-50s compared to China's mid-90s, and has recently dipped to as low as 16%, and that's higher than China's dissatisfaction rate. These factors, long-term orientation, government satisfaction, are very, very important for this discussion, because if the Chinese government tells the people they need to go through a difficult time, as long as the reason is good, it will get widespread support. And the complete opposite is true for the US, who will not support a politically motivated austerity campaign. Ask any psychologist. The situation is quite frightening. According to the Washington Times, if no trade were to happen between China and the USA, 95% of all ibuprofen, 91% of hydrocortisone, 80% of antibiotics are all made in China and would stop arriving. Within a few days of decoupling, hospitals would be hoarding drugs for special cases. Rich people. Sportswear is a little more complicated. A vast amount of sportswear is labeled made in America when the components are made overseas and assembled in America. Probably more than 40% of all completed sports apparel is still made in China. Or it's made using products sourced in China, so this could amount to 80% or higher when all the sports products are taken into account. A pair of Nike shoes, for example, may have laces made in China, soles in Vietnam, uppers from Bangladesh, assembled in the USA. Exactly the same thing applies to cars in the USA. They may very well proudly call themselves American, but up to 70% of the components in them are sourced from China. If you read any car or mechanical component website and look carefully at the wording, designed and engineered in the USA is what they say. What this means is made somewhere else. And we all know where that is most likely to be. At least 70% of all the mobile phones in the United States are made in China. None are made in the USA. Not the Apple nor the Motorola, which moved out of Texas to sites in Brazil and China, and Google then sold them to Asian interests. Even when they were made in the USA, they were assembled from components mostly made in China. So within a month of decoupling, average Americans are going to go shopping. They're going to find no clothes, no shoes, no medicine, no mobile phones, no new cars, or parts to repair their old car. Think of images of Cuba, with many cars there over 70 years old. That's the reality for the US automotive industry a few years after decoupling. It's okay, many people will say, we can get products elsewhere. But remember, decoupling means exactly that. No one knows how many shipping containers exist, but it's probably about 35 million. And China owns 35% of them. If the US and China decouple, sourcing products from other places will be manageable, but shipping them back to the USA may become highly problematic without access to China's approximately 12 million containers, or putting those containers onto container ships, of which almost 1 in 5 belongs to China. There are some things that the US doesn't rely upon China for. Food is obviously one of them. With neighbors such as Canada and Mexico, the US can be sure they'll have enough to eat. But distribution might be difficult. Oil is plentiful in America too, but not the reserves. They aren't being exploited very well now because it's cheaper and less locally polluting to import them. Guns are another. The US currently holds an estimated 400 million privately owned guns. 38% of its citizens are armed. So there's little doubt if they need more guns, they'll get more guns. Now imagine, if you can, a country where citizens can't get their cars repaired or upgrade to the latest iPhone, which probably wouldn't work anyway because the infrastructure can't be maintained. Nor can they get the latest Nike or Converse shoes or any new clothes for that matter. And if that picture isn't dystopian enough, try to picture the world's largest percentage of both legal and illegal drug-dependent citizens who will be off their medication, carrying 400 million private guns between them. In other words, USA, be careful of what you wish for, because what doesn't come from China quite often comes in on Chinese ships, in Chinese containers, with components made in China for assembly, almost certainly by immigrant labor, who may very well start to realize that conditions are better in their own country and think about leaving. Once again, as with everything, there's a lot of stats in there. There is a linked article which has all the links to all the stats that I've found. Please feel free to read that, feel free to comment, ask questions, and I will get back to you. And once again, thanks for listening to Jerry's Take on China. Please do the usual things: like, share, subscribe. I appreciate that. That's how we get the word out. Thank you again. See you next time.